Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Top 10 edition of Magic Mike's, proudly sponsored by our Patreon supporters and CoolStuffInc.com, where you can find cool stuff in stock every day. And check out our co-sponsor, CardHoarder.com, offering the best inventory prices and delivery of cards for Magic Online. And check out our Altar Sleeves. Support the show by using the code MagicMikes at checkout for 5% off anything in the store at AltarSleeves.com. I am Evan Irwin, and we get started each week by saying hello to my two co-hosts, MTG Nerd Girl.
Hey, guys.
Ruben Bressler.
What's up? I've been preparing for this episode for months, growing out my Garrick beard.
For months.
Months now.
So many.
This is my... I'll get rid of it. No, I'm kidding. I'm keeping the beard, but...
Yeah.
I'm fully prepared for the Living in the Woods episode of Magic
I feel like
Mike's.
you need a gingerbread cookie. If you're going to go with the skit, you needed...
True. I don't have one as a prop.
Man, remember when the videos were that good? Like the preview videos for sets? They really went all out there for a minute. Well, we also begin with our choice of the top comment from last week in a segment we call Honorable Mention, where Ruben will tell us who was the most eloquent, letting us know what card we did not choose as one of our top 10 bugs. Ruben?
We had a lot of good entries this week, but I really enjoyed Greyguess, or Greyguess, _ MTG, who writes, "This card was kept in many Legacy Storm sideboards as an answer to the control decks. I can't believe it was missed by Mr. Pedigree himself, Ruben. Even though you didn't mention it, you mentioned half of its name at the end. Xantid Swarm."
Yeah, Xantid Swarm is 1 green mana for a 0/1 that showed up originally in Scourge. It's a rare insect that has flying, and whenever it attacks, defending player can't cast spells this turn. So you smash in, and you don't, who cares if you deal damage or not, because you're comboing off, and they can't do anything. The end.
Yeah. It was very good against Force of Will decks, anything that was trying to Flusterstorm you, because this is a creature, so it itself can't get Flusterstormed. And then it comes down turn 1, and by the time you're ready to combo off a turn or two later, there you go.
Nice.
Yeah, it lost favor. You know what I mean? Like, for a long time this was played. I mean, this was long time.
There got to be other options. I believe at the time this replaced City of Solitude in Storm sideboards, which was a 3 mana enchantment.
Right.
And that was way too much time to be wasting. This allowed you to play Xantid Swarm and then combo off on turn 2. Uninterrupted, which was nice. And then we got things like Silence, Orum's Chant, I believe might have existed already, but this was a slightly different situation than that, being a creature. And then you had other hate bears that prevented people from casting things on your turn, but for a very long time this was the go-to.
The idea generally was, you know, when you're playing combo, people are going to get rid of all of their creature removal. So you put in your creatures that stop them. They can't kill the 0/1 because they got rid of everything. And robbers who follow his brother. Well, thank you very much, Greyguess or Greyguess, for being a part of the show. Please contact us on social media for your prize. The Reddits, the Facebooks, Twitter DMs. Hit us up.
Primarily Twitter and Discord are the best ways to reach us. The official Twitter account at Magic Mike's Cast.
And if you want to support us on Patreon, patreon.com/magicmikes, so you can hang out
also
in our
there.
Discord and talk to us there. All right. So, of course, thanks again to CoolStuffInc.com for sponsoring this giveaway. And stay tuned for our top 10 list this week, and maybe you can win next week's free gift certificate. Because it is time to talk about our top 10. Green cards. And arena. Green cards and arena.
Yeah,
we're getting close to the end. What do we do? Multicolor after green? Is that
we'll do artifacts and or colorless. We'll do colorless and then we'll do multicolored.
And that's it.
And colorless, I guess, covers lands.
Yeah, probably.
Well, I got my head bitten off for putting a black land.
Did you really?
Black
First of all, how dare you?
Yes.
I mean,
I feel like it has to cover lands.
No, I mean, you know, we had like sorceries as our top 10 bugs. I think we're going to be okay.
Yeah. No, I still don't regret it. I still think it deserved a spot on my list, so I don't care.
It's fine. Yeah. Who cares? But we'll work our way through it. Either way, Nerd Girl, kick us off. What's your number 10?
All right. So my number 10 is actually my one of 2 hires. Oh. So unfortunately, I can't kick us off this week.
Well, Ruben, what's your number 10?
I can kick us off this week. My number 10 is actually the most played card that is available on Arena and is green in the entire Commander format. It's a card that I've cast in Draft, in Standard, in Commander. It's just a ubiquitous card. It is a version of a previous card because the first version of this card was an arcane sorcery, but ever since they got rid of the arcane keyword, Cultivate has been a staple of eternal formats and casual formats everywhere. Cultivate is 2 generic and a green for a sorcery, primarily showing up in core sets, although I believe it premiered in a commander set. Cultivate is search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, reveal one of those cards and put it onto the battlefield tapped, and put the other into your hand, then shuffle your library.
Cultivate's great. I mean, we're using this in, like you said, eternal formats. It's great in EDH decks, especially, the crazier colors you get, the better. It's also good and limited. This is a staple in any format that wants you to be able to play 3 colors. And green is always the easiest place to make that happen. And this, it ramps you, it gives you card advantage, it gives you everything you need. This is definitely an amazing green card to kick us off for top 10.
Yeah, it's wonderful. They seem to try to reprint Kodama's Reach as much as possible. But Cultivate's kind of the other side of that coin. It's cheaper, but you lose the arcane stuff about it, which has its own little kind of flair. But you can't beat Cultivate. It's sort of a very green defining spell. Rampant Growth, probably too far, probably too good. But Cultivate is just right where they need it to be in terms of mana cost and ramp.
I also really wanted to show off the Secret Lair Cultivate, which is a beautiful piece of art of growing a new lotus, a new black lotus, from adverse conditions, which I thought was a beautiful sentiment.
Absolutely. For my number 10, this has just been this is a creature that showed up early last year, and I loved it. I thought it was cool, and I got to play with it, and it was even cooler. And now I've played with it in a ton of decks. I've played with it in Brawl. I've played with it in some older formats, mainly played with it in Standard and Alchemy Standard. But you can't not love Toski, Bearer of Secrets.
Aww.
It's a legendary squirrel, y'all, and he's all small, but he's rare. He's a green and 3 generic mana for a 1/1 rare legendary squirrel that cannot be countered, is indestructible, attacks each combat if able, and whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card. That's a lot. It's a lot.
And it triggers the turn it comes down, which is really awesome.
Yes, it does. And I love it.
There have been many games, particularly in the Arena and Vintage cubes, where I've just had 85 mana dorks laying around and are like, well, this is the worst. And it goes back to your old style Edric Spymaster of Trest, turn them into card advantage, except for that this is monocolored, is indestructible, so it can stop something the turn you play it, which is pretty relevant a lot of the time. I mean, Toski is just a spectacular Magic card.
And
my biggest regret with Toski is that he came out too late. I actually have a pet sugar glider that is basically just a flying squirrel.
Do you really?
Oh, wow.
I do. And unfortunately, it's already been named for several years, but I totally would have just named it Toski.
What is your... I didn't know this. Hold on. This is now...
This is true.
The podcast is over.
The podcast is over. Yeah. Her name is Tishka. She is a sugar glider. They are from Australia. She's super cute. She actually doesn't live with me right now because Hammy and her don't get along super well. So she lives with my mom's old roommates, and I just send food and everything. But I'm hoping to get her back here eventually.
Can we put Tishka in the thumbnail for this episode?
Oh, sure. I can put a picture of her.
Yeah, I mean, we'll need to get an image to Rich, but I'm sure we can
get
work it
so
out.
many more clicks if we show off Tishka.
I mean, that sounds way cooler than, what normally we put out there. So let's move on here to number 9. Nerd Girl, what's your number 9?
So my number 9 is a card that probably won't stand the test of time, but I thought it deserved a place because it's very, very good right now, but also because I feel like it's kind of unique and very interesting, and I just like saying the name. So Asika's Chariot, or Cadillac, is my favorite nickname for a card probably ever. Is a 4-mana legendary artifact vehicle. When it enters the battlefield, you create 2 green cat tokens that are 2/2s, and then you can crew them for 4, so both cats, and it becomes a 4/4 that when it attacks, copy a target token that you control. This can include the cats themselves, the wolves from Ranger's class. It can also copy clue tokens that you can get from Briarbridge Tracker, things like that. So it's very, very unique and interesting, and it's kind of a powerhouse in both standard, a little less so, but still very good in alchemy. But the thing I like the most is that it's something very different. This is a vehicle that's very good in standard, which is not something we typically see.
I don't think Wizards has really solved the vehicle numbers yet. Like, I think they're still trying to figure out like what the right number of mana cost to crew amount needs to be. And like, I think you can see clearly they wanted a Seeker's Chariot to play a little bit differently and to have two bodies instead of just the one body was just kind of a little bit too much. It might still be a little bit too much, honestly. But like, what if it made a 2/2, but the crew was 3, right? Like, if it made you kind of reach for one more than you currently have. I don't know if that's worse or better or whatever, but I know that you play Ren and 7.
It reads worse.
Yeah, but Ren and 7 copying this thing is just, it's crazy.
The nerf did hurt. There's a reason why green is not super great in alchemy right now. I think that they probably did solve that problem. At the very least, they did with all of the added bomby alchemy cards like Young Whelp.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
or whatever, Fearsome Whelp.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this was always put into the file as being Freya's chariot from Norse mythology, which is pulled by 2 cats. So my assumption was they wanted Freya's chariot. Here are 2 cats pulling the chariot, and it was always these numbers. Then it ended up being a little too strong, so they dropped it down to crew 2 and only 1/2/2 cat, which is, still quite good, but you're right, not nearly as good as it was before.
It's 2 cats. Now they're not the 2 kitty cats. I could have made them like 1/1 cats, right? That'd be kind of neat. Because you still get 2 of them.
I just wish that they would have used the word populate. Like, why can't we? Why are we so afraid of using keywords from Magic's past?
Like, as long as
new cards,
as long as they put the rules text in like the not extended art version or whatever.
Right.
Awesome. That's cool. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't get it. Something, the amount of headspace needed to play Magic is finite and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool. Ruben, what's number 9?
My number 9 is a card that has proven to be a test of time standing creature. When it came out, I think people sort of underestimated it. It then very quickly proved itself about a week after it was first released in one of, if not the most powerful Magic set that we've had in recent memory, Throne of Eldraine. I remember playing in the early access streamer event, and my first deck that I wanted to build was a Simic food deck, and the first card that I cast was Gilded Goose. Then I played an Oko on my second turn, and I was like, this is a problem. Not gonna last long, but Gilded Goose, still very, very, very good. Gilded Goose is a green mana for a creature bird. It is an 0/2 with flying that when it enters the battlefield, create a food token, and it has 2 activated abilities. You can tap it and sacrifice a food to add 1 mana of any color, or you can pay a generic into green and tap it to make another food token. Very good on turn 1. And not dead late game, as you can just keep making more foods.
Yep. This was one of the cards that... This is the reason for one of my favorite bugs in the previous episode, Kroll Harpooner, because you get to kill the goose, which was great. This card, honestly, I don't know that Oko was as much of a problem. The issue was that it had such a strong package built around it, because you had Once Upon a Time to ensure you had all your pieces, you had Gilded Goose to ramp it out, and then you had the wolf to protect it to come down the next turn. Mm-hmm. And all of these things kind of just made this barrier around Oko that let him run away with games. So, I mean, not to say that Oko wasn't overpowered, but Goose and Once Upon a Time was definitely part of what made it so easy or difficult to stop, so easy to win games. So Absolutely. This card is pretty busted, even though it looks small.
Looks innocuous. Any card that makes things is almost always good. If it makes a thing, if it makes more things, that's even way, way better, because it's an artifact. That doesn't mean you have to just sack it for life. You can tap it with Urza to make mana.
I've 100% cast Gilded Goose and then sacrificed the food to a tinker in the Vintage Cube.
Let's go.
Yeah, Thraben Inspector, even something like Blood Fountain. Anything that makes a second permanent is good.
Is very strong. This card was Like they knew how good it was going to be, and they didn't want to let down. What should the golden goose look like if you're going to make one? Well, it's pretty damn good. I will take it. Now for my number 9, I've leaned a little bit harder on some of the alchemy releases in particular, because I want it to be like, this is a digital thing. You can't get this in real life, and this is the first one of those cards. This is also one of the first cards that, I don't know, I kind of have this weird habit of like, there will be a new set that comes out and I will like craft all the wrong things. Like every time I will always just miss something. I'll go, oh my God, now I got to get 4 new rare wild cards because I hadn't played against it at that point in time or whatever. And the metagame was forming. Well, I sure was not expecting, on their turn 2, they foretold something. And then on turn 6, they destroyed my life with Lupine Harbingers. Lupine Harbingers are real. First of all, like flatly, it's a green and 3 generic mana for a 4/4 rare wolf with trample and haste. So 4 mana, 4/4 trample haste. There's the floor. Well, it enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it, where X is the number of turns you've begun since it was foretold. So that means if you did it on 2 and you foretell it on 6, it's going to be an 8/8 trample haste if it comes out and you don't, skip the mana cost or whatever. That's a lot, and you'll die to it, and it'll come out of nowhere, and you will die, and that's how this card works.
Yeah, I don't think this is one of the more powerful alchemy only cards, but it is very, very powerful. I don't know, is this seeing any play in Historic?
It's seeing some play in the alchemy standard decks. The green decks are playing some of this.
So yeah. It's definitely going to be good in alchemy. I'm just wondering how powerful this is in eternal formats.
Probably not going to get there in eternal formats. Maybe just 1 or 2 more mana too much if it was maybe 5 mana or 4 mana in foretell.
Sure.
But,
I'll take it. Or if it had a way to, if it was more of a reality smasher, right? Like if it had more of a way to protect itself. But even as is,
yeah,
the numbers are there. It's a ball lightning off the top in green. It is, and if you foretell it and put your time investment into it, it's just an enormous beater. The haste is huge, obviously, and the trample is relevant. Like your mid-game creatures, your Essica's Chariots, your Old Growth Trolls, although Old Growth Troll does have trample. You have your Ren and 6 tokens. They can't push through on the ground super easily.
Right. Like think of how powerful this is versus control. They're going to sit there and they're going to wrath and they're going to do all that stuff and blah, blah, blah. And you're just going to wait and just do your thing. And they'll finally put the shields down. And when they do, this damn thing comes down. It's like a 12/12 and just destroys them. And so I've been on the other end of that before. And I'm like, I don't know. Maybe they have something weird, foretold. And I died. Mm-hmm. Let's move on here to number 8. Ruben, what's number 8?
My number 8, my number 7, and my number 6 are all higher on somebody else's list.
Whoa.
Well, we will see you later. Nerd Girl, what's
Bye
number 8?
Forever.
Friend. So, Nerd Girl, what's number 8?
So I do have a number 8.
Great.
And this is another one similar to the Essica's Chariot where, it's not as iconic as the rest of the list, where these are, cards that will withstand the test of time and be, sort of what we think of when we think of green. This one's a bit different. It's a little bit newer, but I like it because it's very unique and very good, which is not something we typically see when Wizards does something a little bit different. And that is Ranger's Class. This is a 2 mana enchantment class card. When it comes into play, it makes a 2/2 green wolf creature token. For 2 mana, you can level it up to level 2. Whenever creature attacks, whenever creatures attack, you may put a +1/+1 counter on one of those attacking creatures. For 4 mana, it goes to level 3. And you may look at the top card of your library at any time, and you may cast creature spells off the top of the library. So this is coming down as a 2/2. You're getting, your value there with a bear. If you don't have a better play on turn 3, it becomes a 3/3. It becomes very difficult to deal with. And that final level 3, kind of solves the problem that green has, that it starts to run out of steam. It can't recover after a board clear. This kind of fixes that and gives you a bit more steam at the end of the game, which I think is kind of amazing. I do think it's starting to see some play in Historic, and it's also seeing a fair amount of play in EDH and Brawl type decks as well. I think it's just an overall well-rounded card that fits into any green deck that's very unique.
I mean, it's one of the best cards in the set. I mean, you know, this thing was terrific day one. It stayed terrific. It's the best class. Like, I'll take it.
It's ironic that the best class in the Dungeons and Dragons set is one of the oftentimes called the worst class in 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. I'm not sure I agree with that, but they did juice this. I mean, there's no way around it. And again, makes 2 permanents, right?
Yeah.
Like I pay 2 mana and I make a thing. You play your removal spell, I still have a thing in play. So even if you kill my 2/2 after I've leveled up, right? Like,
or even if you disenchant the card itself. You know?
Exactly. It
still
leaves something behind. And all for the low cost of 2 mana. Pretty great.
Yeah, the card is absolutely terrific. Let's see here. For my number 8, this card 100% sees a ton of play in Historic. The only reason you can play it, the only format you can play it in is Historic. But that's okay, because it was great. And Wizards' first real foray into making these digital-only things showed up in Jumpstart Historic Horizons. And hot damn, let me tell you, when they made a Planeswalker for Historic, they made it really good, because Freyalise Sky Shroud Partisan is a real Magic card, and it is really good. It is 2 green and generic mana for 4 loyalty, first of all. 4 loyalty on 3 mana. It is a mythic legendary Planeswalker Freyalise. It has +1, untap up to 1 target elf. That elf and a random elf creature card in your hand perpetually get +1/+1. -1, you seek an elf card, which finds an elf card in your deck, puts it in your hand. And for -6, you conjure a card named Regal Force onto the battlefield. For those who don't know, Regal Force is a giant monster. It is 7 mana for a 5/5 that when it enters the battlefield, you draw a card for each green creature you control. Starts with 4 loyalty.
Yeah.
This was my number 10.
Nice.
Yeah, this is really an interesting card. I wasn't expecting to see something so directly targeting one particular deck. I think that it was really, really neat to see something make its way into a deck that has been very relevant for a very long time, but not be busted. So I thought that that was pretty cool. I mean, it's still a very, very good card, but I feel like, you know, when we see a card printed in, a current set that very drastically impacts an old school deck or something that's been around for a long time, oftentimes that needs to be nerfed. But this is, I think, pretty well rounded and a very good Planeswalker for that deck.
Yeah.
I also like that this Planeswalker kind of poetically uses the 3 new keywords from Jumpstart Historic Horizons in Perpetually Seek and Conjure in a way that is not obtrusive. Like it doesn't necessarily make you go, oh, they're just trying to shove these words in together. It all makes sense for the deck.
Right. And it's all very powerful. Like being able to find an elf is always great, no matter what it is. The +1 is great when you only have 1 elf in your hands. You know exactly what's going to boost.
Turn 1 mana dork, turn 2 this, untap it, attack for 2, and make something in your hand bigger is insane.
Oh, it is a hug from Jesus, y'all. Well, let's move on here to number 7. Nerd Girl, what's your number 7?
My number 7 is a little aggressive green dork that we've been seeing kind of do its thing in, green has kind of changed a little bit. I feel like we have been getting a little bit more aggressive and a little less tall with these green decks that we've been seeing in the last few years. And this was really kind of the start of it. And it's also been around long enough to know that it is seeing play in more eternal formats as well. And this is, the little dork on Arena that kind of made everything work, and that's Pelt Collector. This 1/1 for 1 green mana is an elf warrior that whenever a creature you control enters the battlefield or dies, if that creature's power was greater than Pelt Collector's, put a +1/+1 counter on Pelt Collector. As long as Pelt Collector has 3 or more +1/+1 counters on it, it gains trample. Again, this is a super aggressive little dude that comes out and gets bigger over time. It gets trample. It becomes a real threat. And if your opponents are using their removal on this, feels pretty good for your 3 and 4 drops. And we're seeing this, make its way into Historic and other formats. So it's definitely a neat little creature.
Yeah, this card is like 100% push. This is like... Around this time was when, the creatures, not only was it a good creature, like not only was that first ability sweet, it has that second ability to give it trample because YOLO. And that's just where we're at, because it's more fun if your giant monster can now trample than not.
It's also good in multiples. Your Pelt Collectors that come into play on the same turn grow up together, but one that comes down later is supported by one that came down on turn 1. There was a deck going around that was dependent on +1/+1 counters with a Conclave Mentor that made this a 3/3 on turn 2. That was very good. This combos very well with things like Burning Tree Emissary into a 3-power creature to immediately grow it up. There are some really interesting things to be done with Pellet Collector. And oh, by the way, the green Stompy deck has a bunch of 4/4s in it, so this thing gets up to be a 4/4 pretty quickly.
And it scares me. I don't like it. When someone leaves with a Pellet Collector, I'm like, okay, I'm under a clock now. I could die. For my number 7 here, this is at this point, I'm getting to old man Magic status. It's getting to become a classic card. Like, how far back do you need to go before you call it classic? Well, how about 15-ish years, maybe 14 or so, something like that seems classic now. At the time, revolutionary and crazy and weird. And what in the hell are you doing giving green literal card draw? Just straight pay green mana, draw some cards. That's all. That is the agreement that you have when you cast Harmonize. Originally showing up in Planar Chaos, has been reprinted a bajillion times, and I think is totally fine in Standard, but whatever. I loved it when it was there. Harmonize is 2 green, 2 generic mana for an uncommon sorcery. Real easy, real clear. Draw 3 cards. The end.
Yeah, I mean, at the time, this came out in Planar Chaos, and it was a color-shifted card, and I bet that most people today don't even know that it was originally a color-shifted card from the blue card Concentrate, which was sorcery, speed, 4 mana, draw 3 cards. Not very exciting in blue.
I didn't know it was color-shifted.
Are you serious?
In green, very exciting. Particularly good in like the snow ramp decks of Standard of the time, and the mana ramp decks. If you remember, what was the guy's? Chris Walterek. Was his name. Walterek, that's a name I've not heard in a long time. And Kenny Meyer, like that era of the proto SCG Open series was very into casting Harmonize to draw, actual Shivan dragons at the time. Just a very solid card, and good to see it reprinted most recently in I believe the Strixhaven Mystical Archive.
Yeah.
So, like, when you say, like, color shifted, I think that's, like, a thing that they did at a specific time. I always recognize cards and I think, oh, this is different. This is sort of like this color trying to get access to this other thing. So that's what I mean when I'm like, oh, I don't really, like, connect these dots necessarily. Right. But I don't follow stuff super closely like you guys do either sometimes.
Well, I mean,
at the time, green
15-year-old
didn't just... Exactly, it's 15 years old. Now, green does draw cards.
Right.
Like that.
That was weird back in the day. That was really odd.
This was the only card that did it other than, like, Striped Bears. You know what I mean?
We're talking back then. I mean, without another color involved, I don't think green by itself was drawing any cards. Or it would do things like punish you. Like if your opponent does so and so, plays the instance on your turn, do things or whatever. But yeah, not anything.
But yeah, this was before Elvish Visionary. So
back in the day. Well, let's move on here to number 6. Nerd Girl, what's number 6?
My number 6 is a card that is a little bit more iconic. So we're moving out of these more recent things of cards that are just unique and very powerful in Standard. This is one of my all-time favorite green cards that comes and goes with popularity, and it sees eternal play. It's a great sideboard card. It's great main deck. And it answers so many things. And I've loved this card for a very long time. And that is Scavenging Ooze.
Ooh,
Scavenging Ooze is a 2-mana 2/2 Ooze token. And for 1 green mana, you can exile target card from a graveyard. If it was a creature card, put a +1/+1 counter on the Ooze, and you gain 1 life. This is a great sideboard card to answer anything with graveyard interaction. It's also an amazing card to bring in against more aggressive decks because it gives you an early drop if your deck is slower. And it lets you gain a couple of life against things like mono red. And I can tell you, getting a 3/3 that has gained you a life or 2 that then blocks a creature can make all of the difference against those aggressive red decks.
Yeah, you have to answer one question. Who's the man?
Oh my God.
That's all I'm saying.
Evan, please.
That's all I'm saying. You have to answer that question.
This
card was amazing when it first showed up. This card was incredible. This was At the time, some of the best graveyard hate that we had like ever seen outside of like what was the Withered Wretch or something, right? From Onslaught or
But
something.
this is better than Withered Wretch.
Way better, just leagues better. And so that's what we had come from.
Yeah. Exactly.
And now you're gaining life and putting counters. What? Like,
well, when this first came out,
crazy.
I believe this came out in a Commander
it did.
expansion. And it was like this card revolutionized Legacy because at the time Tarmogoyf was the end all be all of colorless and a green 2-drops. This could not only shrink Tarmogoyf, but could get itself bigger. And so it replaced Tarmogoyf in decks like Maverick. Later, it got reprinted into Standard and into other Masters sets. For example, Modern Masters 3, where it was the Magic Mike's preview card.
Nice.
So Scavenging Ooze has been very good in like Standard Jund, in Modern, like basically any deck that can use a solid body that wants some tangential graveyard hate. This card does the work.
There was a very painful 2-year stretch. He jumped over it, but I'm telling you, I was in the middle of when Commander 2011 came out until Magic 2014, about 3 years, I guess, depending on how you're looking at it. But there was a good 2-3 year stretch where this thing just got expensive and dumb. It was $20, it was $30, it was $40. Like to get one copy, like when Magic 2014 came out, it was like a $20 rare because again, it was still the hotness at the time. And boy, they have reprinted into the dirt. Good. I'm not saying it's necessarily bad. I like it being in formats. It's a great, powerful card, but wow, what mighty have fallen. All right, let's move on here to number 6. My number 6 is a staple. It's a stapliest staple to ever staple. This is a card that if you are playing Brawl, you are probably going to put this into your deck. If you're playing Elves, it's probably going to be either in your sideboard or your main deck if you're feeling froggy like that. But the usefulness cannot be overstated to a creature that enters the battlefield and disenchants something, and that's Reclamation Sage. It is a green, 2 generic mana for a 2/1 uncommon elf shaman, and as I mentioned, when it enters the battlefield, you destroy a target artifact or enchantment. Get out of here. You blink it, you do it again. That's what I'm talking about. Kill it, resurrect it, do it again.
This card was so good.
So good.
Or is so good. I mean, there's nothing, I don't know. Just the numbers are perfect on it.
Yeah.
And, you know, I caught myself drafting this like 3rd in really cube good. Decks. Just because like you don't get this type of card advantage really on creatures. This type of ubiquity on creatures, especially in super powered formats.
Yeah, it's fine to play main deck in regular limited formats. It's something I will always play and very rarely cut because the worst case scenarios is just a body that's slightly overcosted and the upside is huge. Now, the stronger the format goes, the more powerful the artifacts and enchantments are going to be getting. This just becomes a powerhouse.
Yeah. When you're able to pick off Immortal Suns in Phyrexian arenas, it's a lot better than being able to pick off like, you know, pacifisms and great axes. Exactly.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, this card is just so wonderfully useful. I love spells on creatures, you know, put the spell on a stick, like let's go. I love it. And the fact that it's an elf, like man, they made all the right choices with this card. I love it. All right, let's move on here to number 5. I share my number 5 of all the green cards in all the world.
Wow.
With me.
I share my number 5 with Nerd Girl. Well, feel free to tell us all about what we chose for number 5, and I'll read it for you.
Sure. So our number 5 is a card that came out more recently with one of the more powerful sets. It, you know, arguably could have used a nerf, but I think it didn't really get as much of a chance to shine because of other cards in the format that kind of specifically targeted it, which is a little bit on the sad side. But yeah, our cumulative number 5 is Great Henge.
I have a copy right back there that if it wasn't difficult to get to, I would pull it out. It's also $45. Jesus.
Wow. It is?
It
still?
is. Yeah, for real. Those cards don't go down. When they're that good casually, they'll just stay there forever. The Meat Hook Massacre was going to be a $50 card until the end of time.
Jeez.
The Great Henge is 2 green and 7 generic mana, so that's 9 mana for this mythic legendary artifact, but you ain't paying that. This card costs X generic mana less to cast, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. Tap, add 2 green, you gain 2 life, and whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, you put a +1/+1 counter on it, and you draw a card. You didn't even need the counter on this card. You didn't even need it. The counter is just like such a slap in the face. It's like, not only am I going to get sweet card advantage, smack you with a
Also
+1/+1
bigger.
counter.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Every Land War Elf becomes a Land War Visionary for the rest of time. Yeah.
And you're going to tap it every turn anyway just to gain 2 life. Like,
Yeah. It also does that
Crazy.
same thing I was talking about with Ranger's class, where it gives green the ability to keep its foot on the gas, survive board wipes.
Oh, yeah.
Once this thing comes down, especially if you get it down nice and early with a questing beast, you're going to be getting a ton of card advantage and just take over the game.
unless you have a
This-
reclamation stage.
Well, there you go. This was my number 8.
Nice.
This is one of, if not the most powerful green cards in the Arena Cube. A lot of the time, like you just said, you run out of gas somewhat easily in green unless you have one of the ways to refill your hand. A lot of the best ways to do that are sorceries that depend on power as you cast them. This being an artifact that does the same thing means that you just get to recoup the advantage as you go. So it's a lot better than having stuff in your hand that can get discarded or, is in some way clunking things up. This just comes down early. You go turn 1 mana elf, turn 2 questing, or not questing beast, love struck beast.
Right.
Turn 3, you can play a Great Henge. And that's absurd. And this card is just amazing.
It's so good. Like this card, I swear to God, this card has suspend 2, you win the game. Because when I'm playing against this card, the turn they play it, ideally you should have the answer. You're going to start looking for the answer. Okay. You give them a turn with it. They draw probably 2 cards. It feels really bad. You're going to get really run over. That's it. If your next turn doesn't involve killing them or the Great Henge, you've probably just lost that game. Like it's just over. I can say it from experience.
This and Galta, the Primal Hunger, they're best friends.
Oh, yeah.
One of them makes the other one cost 2 mana. And the Great Henge, fortunately for you, taps for 2 mana. So I've had several games where I cast the Great Henge and then cast a Galta immediately thereafter.
Filthy. That's what that is. Ruben, what's number 5?
Well, we're back, ladies and gentlemen.
You
And
did it.
I'm back, I should say. And I didn't put this card at number 6, even though I probably should have. But we talked a little bit about this card last week in our Bugs episode. This card takes over games, and as we mentioned, it put a roof on MTG Arena. Anytime that you do something historic, something necessary, like you put a ceiling on the number of tokens that you're allowed to produce, you do something special. Scute Swarm is my number 5. 2
Nice.
generic and a green for a 1/1 insect. With landfall, whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, create a 1/1 green insect creature token. If you control 6 or more lands, create a token that's a copy of Scute Swarm instead. So oftentimes you will play, this 6th land, Cultivate, for example. That is a common play pattern, and you're immediately getting all of these little idiots.
Imagine the amount of trolling that it took. Imagine the fact that the servers can handle tens of thousands, 100,000 players. I have no idea what their max capacity is. But imagine how much trolling was required to slow those servers down so hard they had to go in there and programmatically limit you from making as many as you wanted. It broke everything. And that's great. That's
Scute Swarm is also kind of a fan favorite. Like I feel like even if this card was bad, it's still something people love to play with. It is just a neat idea that lets people do some really cool interactions.
And I like, I really enjoy when Wizards takes a term and it becomes like a thing. So like Scute, right? When you hear Scute, it's going to do something with lands, it's going to get bigger, it's going to copy itself, it's going to do something Zendikari, right? And it's very Scute-ish. And I think that's awesome that they have that in their back pocket. All right, let's move on here to number 4. It is my one and only hire. So I will be taking a break for this number. Nurgle, what's number 4?
All right, so my number 4 is a card that none of us will ever entirely remember what it does. This card has a
Challenge
lot of text.
accepted.
Oh.
I'm sure you guys already know
it's
what
this
it
card.
is.
Oh, shoot.
But
Never
my-
mind. Challenge
Yep.
not accepted.
Nope.
My number 4 is Questing Beast.
Yep.
This is a giant card full of spaghetti text that, like, you'll always remember a piece, or you'll always
Right.
remember, like, 90% of it, but not the other 10%. And the 10% that you don't know will always change. Sometimes
Yeah.
you'll forget one part, sometimes you'll forget the other part. Questing Beast is a 4-mana legendary creature beast that is a 4/4 with Vigilance, Death Touch, and Haste. Questing Beast can't be blocked by creatures power 2 or less.
Yep.
Combat damage that would be dealt by creatures you control can't be prevented. And when Questing Beast deals combat damage to an opponent, it deals that much damage to a planeswalker they control as well. So there is a ton of things. And like every time I play this, if I do like a full event or something, I will forget one piece or the other. I never forget like the Death Touch or the Haste, but sometimes the Vigilance. You don't attack. Also, I've definitely attacked a planeswalker with this by accident.
Mhm.
Because you don't need to ever
Right.
attack planeswalkers when you attack them and it redirects damage and you're like, what?
Yeah. But
You've
you always
also
forget something.
Oh.
I've also had people who like blocked with a creature that had protection from something, and then it would die, but Questing Beast says that damage can't be prevented.
Right.
Mhm.
Also, none of the keywords in that keyword soup were either double strike or trample. So you put an Embercleave on a Questing Beast, and it is the meanest, angriest monster that you've ever seen in your entire life.
Yeah, it absolutely destroys. It burninates the whole countryside, all right? That's what it does. And it doesn't have the word "the" in front of it, making it the hardest to remember legendary creature. God, it doesn't even sound like a legendary creature. They could have done anything this card to make it easier to grok, easier to follow. But no, man, it just does all the stuff. And even messing with like protection creatures, man, that's when it gets really weird. No one sees that coming. I'll block it and give it pro green. You're like, sorry.
Well, also, it can't get fogged, right? Like that's the main
can't get
function
fogged.
of the ability.
Can't stop it.
Yeah.
And then the little, you can't chump it because you don't, because it had to be power 2 or greater,
Right.
or 3 or greater rather. Oh my God, that card's insane. Ruben, what's number 4?
My number 4 is we're back on my BS, which is it's a 4-drop. That is,
Of course it is.
Yeah, of course it is. And it dominated a format for a while. It dominated a couple of formats for a while. In fact, it was so dominant that it got banned in both Pioneer and Historic. And it was a card that, we sort of saw it coming, because anytime you give us free things, it's a problem, right? And anytime you're allowed to, Frantic Search or Treachery untaps my lands, that's free, right? Like, I don't think that's fair. What if we just untapped every land, every turn, forever? Wilderness Reclamation is my number 4.
Oh, boy.
3 generic and a green for an enchantment that says at the beginning of your end step, untap all lands you control. This is also a trigger, which means that you can sort of double up your mana in interesting ways.
Oh, yeah.
So at the end of your next turn, a very common play pattern would be play this. Then the next turn you would play your, let's say, 5th land and end up with 10 mana in your end step, being able to Expansion Explosion for 6 to be able to kill something and draw 6 cards.
Yeah, and they stack the triggers if you get like multiple of them. This card was silly. I've never played with it in competitive Magic, but I've played against it a lot in competitive Magic. I remember like playing against it in the Invitational and just being like, oh crap, how many, and yeah, you end up doing that a lot.
$13 foil, everybody.
Yeah, believe it.
The card is stupid. The card is dumb. This card, like, it was so fun in that kind of era around, right after Throne, and then we started going through Ravnica and stuff, and just all the pros just like losing their minds. They're just like, why? What are you doing? R&D, what are you doing? Why is this uncommon? Like, it could be a rare, for example. Why did you make this to start with was a question. And it was just wild to see them just lose their minds over it.
I would have rather this been a rare, not only because it is a rare effect, but also I don't like drafting this card because
it's
most of your
terrible.
deck is sorcery speed.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some activated abilities you can kind of abuse with it, but
Sure.
still,
Yeah.
4 mana do nothing. Kind of a 4 mana do nothing.
opens up counters a little bit. You know, it kind of makes Simic a more viable option, but it's really only Simic. And if I remember correctly, there wasn't like instant speed draw spells. So like it helped you with the counters, but you still don't want to jam your deck full of too many. So I found this not to be worth it in limited.
Yeah, it wasn't really worth it in limited. It was good in the adapt deck, and that was about it.
And it was busted where it was busted.
Right.
Oh, yeah, there for a minute, they just got really addicted to like giving us mana doublers. It was really weird. Fires of Invention, I mean, some others we'll talk about. All right, let's move on here to number 3, which I have one, and it's great, and I want to talk about it because it's super fun. It's a card that reads horribly. Like, it really, Wizards, really. The wording on this card makes my brain hurt. And I think just should not be where it is. All right, so here was the line as has been explained. The reason the cards and the cards like it work in this really weird way I'm about to explain is because if you wanted to get rid of one thing, you could also get rid of all the other copies in your deck in case you don't want to draw it because it's bad in the matchup. I don't think of it that way, all right? Grizzled Huntmaster says,
discard. Oh my God.
Exile a creature from your hand and go get a sweet one from your sideboard. That's what it says. That's what it does. The rest of it is just kind of nonsense, but let's go. For 2 green and generic mana, it's a 4/3 rare human warrior. Already good stats on the mana line. When it enters the battlefield, you may exile a creature card from your hand. I wish it didn't keep going. If you do, search your hand and library for any number of cards with the same name, exile them, then shuffle. Choose a creature card you own from outside the game. Conjure a duplicate of that card into your hand for each card exiled from your hand this way. This does see high-level competitive play. This lets you run, bullets in your sideboard basically to go find whatever you need at the time. And you exchange the creature in your hand with the best thing in your sideboard for the moment. That's what it does, and it's great.
Yeah. This was on my short list of worst cards of last year because it has so many words that are irrelevant and stupid. But the effect is very good.
It does strong. A thing. Like, yes, removing some of the like lower creature, like smaller creatures or things that aren't relevant in your matchup can be quite useful, but for the most part, it isn't going to be super impactful. Having more than one creature for you to exile from your hand is pretty rare, but it does happen from time to time. You might just not find it valuable to be casting like your 1-drops on turn 5 or 6, especially in mono green. Mm-hmm. So I've definitely gotten rid of some Ascendant pack leaders where I've had multiples of them and get 2 copies of Oddity, right?
Right.
And that can be super valuable. I think this card is really neat. I do think that the other text, though relevant at high level play, is going to be pretty useful for the average Magic situation.
It's not worth the cost of the lines of text. Like, why do we need these text lines?
If it literally said...
That is why we are not in the MPL.
Yeah, and I get that, but for me, I'm just like, part of it is I like clean, nice designs that don't have these, a sentence and a half long clauses of other things you could do. If it just said exile a card, if you do, go, conjure a card of whatever. Awesome. That was great. You had me at hello, man. You didn't have to keep going.
With all of this said, this card's great. Like 4/3 for 3 that upgrades a Land War Elf into a 7-drop or whatever.
Or whatever you need.
It's great.
Yeah, terrific. Ruben, what's number 3?
My number 3 is a card that is going to be controversial. And has been controversial for its entire existence. It is the best hate card that's ever been printed. It is an $8 uncommon. It is banned in Historic. It is banned in Pioneer. And it was at a certain point, it kept hits like Thoughtseize and like Mana Leak and, it made counter spells and discard spells unplayable. Because all you had to do was main deck Veil of Summer.
Card is so busted.
Veil of Summer is an $8 uncommon from M20.
Still,
it is from M20 and it's on the list, and those are the only 2 printings.
Wow.
It's an instant. Draw a card if an opponent has cast a blue or black spell this turn. Spells you control can't be countered this turn. You and permanents you control gain hexproof from blue and black until the end of the turn.
This card's bananas. Like,
card's absurd.
So crazy. It's a 1-mana cryptic command basically, and what happens when, keeping it real goes wrong. Like this is what happens. Like they were like, we're going to really hate on the blue-black control decks. And you have to stop.
They sure did. But
I completely forgot. Like this didn't even make my short list. I didn't even think about this card because it like isn't in my sphere of formats that I currently play now that it's like rotated, but this is definitely a really good choice.
Card is so insane.
There came a point where I was main decking 4 of these.
Oh yeah, certainly.
Yeah. I mean, it was because everybody was playing either blue or black in most of their decks. You're going to play in the mirror, and so other than striking out in the mirror, you're golden.
And as soon as this card went away, Casualties of War became the most played card in the next Magic Championship. Thought Erasure became playable again. Like this card kept Thoughtseize out of Historic. Like
it's true.
That's insane.
I'll take it. I'll take a Thoughtseize-less Historic. Sure. Nerd Girl, what's number 3?
Not with Veil of Summer.
My number 3 is my last of the 2 hires.
Ooh, last of the 2 hires. All right, cool. Well, let's barrel on here into our number 2. Ruben, what's number 2?
My number 2 is my final hire.
Okay.
One hire to rule them all. Nerd Girl, what's number 2?
My number 2 is a card that kind of ruled Standard at the time. This was a card that a lot of people wanted to be banned or nerfed or something. This was sort of a traumatic card and kind of terrorized an entire format, and I love it. I love that it was in green and not in blue and black. So this is where my heart is. I like green decks, as most of you know, and that is Nissa, Who Shakes the World. This 5 mana, 5 loyalty planeswalker has a static ability that says whenever you tap a forest for mana, add an additional forest. The +1 was put 3 +1/+1 counters on up to 1 target non-creature land you control. Untap it. It becomes a 0/0 elemental token with vigilance and haste and is still a land. So you can tap it and then untap it from, and then it becomes a dude in addition to giving you the mana for the turn. And then for the -8 ability, comes in with 5, so it doesn't take long, is you get an emblem with lands you control are indestructible. Search your library for any number of forest cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. So it gives you a bunch more fodder. This was a huge thing, and I remember seeing a bunch of like Simic flash mirrors where it's like who gets their Nissa down, and you're just like kind of like seeing who blinks first. You ended up getting these really interesting control matchups in green. I don't know how it happened, but I think it had a lot to do with Nissa.
It's my number 4.
This was my number 6.
Your number 6. Yeah, this is a card that just like it just took over. Like Wizards, God, stop doubling our mana. Like doubling the mana will break everything. It just does. They did it multiple times in this weird little time period, where I know we wanted to make the rare planeswalkers kind of cool, but not as cool as the mythic ones. But they went really far with this one. And it feels really gross when you untap with it and do something really stupid. But, I mean, it's fun to play with the rocket ships and the rocket launchers, but damn, after a while, it got to be a lot. I was surprised it didn't get banned, honestly, like after a while.
Yeah, there were some calls to ban it. I mean, it got to the point where, if you untapped with Nissa, that was the goal, was to untap with Nissa, because then you got to draw 8 cards with Hydroid Krasis, you got to make a 10/10 Voracious Hydra or whatever it is you wanted to do, and also keep up counter magic or control ability if you cared about that. In addition, this could combo with Wilderness Reclamation in some cases. There was just a bunch of chicanery.
Yep, and the fact that it untaps a land when it enters the battlefield, and it gives it vigilance, which is important, and haste, so you can't screw it up. I mean,
and it was an elemental, so 6 mana Chandra couldn't clear it.
Yeah, couldn't kill it that way either. So isn't that great? That card was busted and super duper good. Well, my number 2 is I don't know if it's busted. It's close. It's real close. I actually got in my copy of this Secret Lair the other day, which is features, they ran a Secret Lair where they said you get 2 of this card and some other cards for $40, but really you're buying 2 Crater Hoof Behemoths for $40. And
this was my number 7.
Yeah, that was a card I could not pass up for your number 7 here. Crater Hoof Behemoth is just a giant monster that ends games. That's just what it does, because that's how he rolls. Creator of Behemoth is 3 green, 5 generic mana. So 8 mana for a 5/5 mythic creature beast with haste. Of course, that's haste. Enters the battlefield. Creatures you control gain trample and get +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. You win the game. That's what it does. That's what it's for, and that's how it rolls. The
Yeah.
end.
This was a revelation, kind of, when it first came about in Avacyn Restored.
Oh yeah. Took a minute too.
And it took a minute for people to realize. Well, first of all, the elf decks at the time. We'll talk about a couple things in order. The elf decks, I believe, found it in Legacy, found it before it became a thing in Standard. Because at the time they were using Regal Force,
Right.
Which, we've talked a little bit about before in relation to Freyalise, but that's a card that doesn't end the game so much as it makes the game inevitable.
Right.
Then they were like, wait, for 1 more mana, we could just end the game. With our natural orders or our Green Sun Zeniths, and then they did that. Fast forward maybe a week or 2, and we get Hoof There It Is at Grand Prix Charlotte and
Sounds
Grand Prix, one of the European ones.
Brad Nelson,
Brad Nelson
joint.
loses in his winning in to Charlotte, but Martin Juza wins with the exact same deck in wherever that
like
was.
Prague or somewhere.
And they were the only 2 people playing the deck that weekend. Playing it with just, Somberwald Sage and some crappy mana idiots. Like, that was the whole deck.
Oh.
And it showcased the power of Craterhoof Behemoth. And it also showcased the excitement, the money value of being a mythic in a set that doesn't get opened a lot.
I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also jumped in on the Secret Lair. This is the very first Secret Lair I've ever bought.
Wow.
It's hard to turn
And
down.
I bought 3 of them.
It's a good idea. It's a good investment.
Well, I figured a play set for me, because the funny thing is I didn't even care about the Craterhoof Behemoth. I wanted the Muldrifter.
Nice.
But that's not green, so I won't talk about it. But they're so cute.
They're adorable.
But yeah, I got a play set, and then I figured I'll have one for my retirement wall.
Perfect.
There you go. Yeah. Cash in later, as you should. I mean, the fact that a card like Natural Order exists just means that, mana costs on green creatures don't matter when it comes to those super duper old formats. So whenever they make something that somehow outpaces this giant monster, which I don't think I want to see it, but if they ever do, well, then they'll just switch to that instead. But meanwhile,
Certainly.
whenever they pull the $40 to $30 to $40, lever and out pops a Craterhoof Behemoth. All right. Well, let's move ourselves on to our number 1. I have a feeling who I'm sharing mine with. So, Nerdgirl, what is your number 1?
My number 1 is what I thought to be one of the more iconic green cards. This was printed before Arena, and when it came onto Arena, it had a very welcoming fan group that were very excited to have it onto Arena. We very early got a pretty cool altar that they associated with the Extra Life program as well, that content creators were given to use this. And I remember opening this card a lot in Limited and being excited that I always had basically replaced my draft. And it sees a ton of Eternal play. Now we're seeing it in Historic, but also in Modern, and that is Collected Company.
Ooh.
This is a 4-mana instant speed spell that you look at the top 6 cards of your library, put 2 creature cards with converted mana cost 3 or less from among them onto the battlefield, put the rest into the bottom of your library in any order. So this is a pretty cool card, and I think it has a lot of support, and we're seeing it a ton on Arena.
This was, of course, my number 2. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of hard to quantify what happened when Coco came about, because it became a new style of deck, not just a new archetype, but forever thereafter, Collected Company decks, you could tell what they were by their deck lists.
Right.
They would have 30 creatures, 4 Collected Companies, maybe 2 other cards of one kind or another, and lands. And that was the deck. And that has been the blueprint for Bant Coco, for Bant Spirits, for Shamans, Goblins was a Coco deck for half a second. humans as an archetype exists, partially with a Coco influence. It exists in that sphere. And so Collected Company, because it digs 6 cards deep, it gets you 6 mana, up to 6 mana worth of cards at instant speed across 2 bodies. It is one of the more influential cards to have come about in the last 10 years.
Yeah, and I just remember being kind of perplexed there, hanging out with Brad Nelson at the time, going like, man, that's a lot of cards. Like normally you look at the top 4. The top 4 was a lot for the green stuff, like top 4 and get a land, top 4 and do whatever, Grizzly Salvage, whatever. Mm-hmm. But like, no, just top 6 and you get 2. You get up to 6 mana worth of creatures for 4 mana, and it doesn't matter what color they are. It doesn't say green, doesn't say mono green or anything like that. That it's just CMC mana value these days, mana value of 3 or less, and you got it. And that card is fan-freaking-tastic. So by by elimination here, Nerd Girls number 3 is our number 1.
We were very close this week.
Very, very close, all over each other in many ways. But that's okay, because for me, it's all about the OG. It's all about the man who started it all. The card that like I got introduced into, like back in the day, way back in the day when I first saw my first Magic card, which was Blinking Spirit, and I was like, oh my god, this, how does it work? And they explained it, and I loved it. Well, when I said, okay, what do the other colors do? Well, they said, okay, here's green, and they handed me this card. Ruben?
It's Land Elves.
Yeah.
Simple. 1 green mana. It's an elf. It's an elf druid. Taps for a green. It's a 1/1.
Yeah.
That's all. That's all it does.
We all put this very iconic little mana dork in the top of our, top 3 of our lists. It is good all the time. It's amazing and limited. You can't be in green without being excited to get this card. You choose it very highly. Mm-hmm. And again, this is, just a staple.
I mean, you can, it's always funny, and you can do this yourself at home. If you are to play any deck that has a Llanowar Elf in it, mark the games in which you had turn 1 Llanowar Elf, and the ones you didn't, and you probably won more of the games you had turn 1 Llanowar Elf. It's just the body, the advantage, the man acceleration, like it's too much a lot of the time, and secretly is just one of the best damn green cards ever made, and I love it. And if this is what helps define green, then good, let's go.
I will add that very rarely does a card win a Pro Tour. Very rarely does a card win 2 Pro Tours. I believe Llanowar Elf has won 4 Pro Tours, and then Fyndhorn Elf has won another.
Nice.
So, yeah, it's up there.
It is, it's a lot. Well, that said, that was our top 10 green cards on Arena. You'll see them on the screen right now for your review. Take a look at my list, Nerd Girl's list, Ruben's top 10. And we want to hear from you about what card we did not talk about. And we'll select our favorite to win $50 worth of anything at CoolStuffInc.com. But before we go, I want to thank my co-host. Thank you, Nerd Girl.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you, Ruben.
Hey, it's not easy being green.
That's right. I'm going to move on here to our outro. I want to thank our sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com, our co-sponsors, CardHoarder.com and UltraSleeves.com, my co-host, MTG Nerd Girl, and Ruben Bressler. You guys for watching and listening. I hope you support us at Patreon.com/MagicMikes. Follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, subscribe to everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online at Twitch.tv at Magic Mikes, on Twitter at Magic Mikes Cast, our Magic Mikes subreddit, and like the Magic Mikes page on Facebook. Or join us here next week, same time, same place, for another episode of Magic Mikes. Good night, everybody.